So this is my how to beat Psy-Frames. So just some cards and some ideas on how to beat them. They're essentially hand traps. You know, that's essentially what the Psy-Frames are. They're hand trap monsters along with the field spell. You can synchro during your opponent's turn, so that is a very useful ability, especially if you make a Black Rose dragon on your opponent's side of the field. During your opponent's turn, make a Black Rose and then clear the field, so that way you can make other plays and set up your field for some extra spam, as it were. So that's something I like to do. I like to Black Rose my opponent when he has a nice little field. The Psy-Frames have effects, obviously. They're tuners with effects that activate from your hand when your opponent does something. We have Alpha when your opponent normals or specials. You can activate this effect. We got Beta when your opponent declares an attack. You can special summon it to trigger its effect. When your opponent activates a monster effect, we have Gamma for that, and negates and destroys the monsters. Beta destroys the monster that attacked. When it ends the battle phase, that's what Beta does. Delta, if your opponent's playing Delta and Epsilon, Delta's effect is when your opponent activates a spell card, you can negate and destroy it, but you have to have no monster in your battlefield in order to trigger these effects, by the way. And then for Psy-Frame Epsilon, when your opponent activates a trap card, while you control monsters, you can special summon this card and negate and destroy the trap. So you can see it deals with the different aspects of Yu-Gi-Oh! Monsters, spells, and traps, right? And then you got Psy-Frame Drive, which is the vanilla monster you need to summon along with the Psy-Frame tuners. If you don't have in your hand, deck, or graveyard a Psy-Frame driver, you cannot trigger any of your Psy-Frame tuners abilities. And then you got your Omega and your Zeta. Those are your archetype synchros. You can synchro into any 7-star or any 8-star of your choosing, but these are the ones that actually come in the archetype. Omega has the ability that once per turn during your opponent's standby, the main ability you will use once per turn during either player's main phase, 1 or 2, you can banish this card from the field and then randomly remove 1 card from your opponent's hand, face up, so you get to see what it is until your next standby phase. And then the Omega comes back to the field and your opponent gets a monster. When Omega comes back to the field, it is not a special summoning, so you can't bomb it or trench or anything like that. It just comes back onto the field. So that's a good way of avoiding cards that trigger when a monster summons. So Omega doesn't start a chain, is what I'm trying to say. So it comes back almost as if it never left. And then it has another ability, which is once per turn during your opponent's standby phase, you can target 1 banished card, return it to the graveyard. Which is an alright effect, right? And then he has a graveyard effect that if this card is in your graveyard, you can target 1 other card in either player's graveyard, shuffle both this card and that card back into their decks. Obviously, you will use this for yourself, mainly to recycle your spells and traps and monsters or anything of that nature, so that's a very useful effect. I definitely like that part of its ability, the ability to recycle itself by going back into the extra deck, so you can re-summon it, but also being able to recycle your MSTs, your Mirror Forces, whatever you use. And then Zeta has the same graveyard effect. No, it has a slightly different effect. Its effect is you can target 1 other Psy-Frame card in your graveyard and return it and then return this card to extra deck. And then the other target, you add it to your hand. Alright, that's the difference. Omega has the ability to put something in your graveyard back into your deck, so you can hopefully draw it later or search it out deliberately, while Zeta would deliberately add a Psy-Frame card from your graveyard to your hand. So that's very useful if you need to get back your tuners or your field spell or your overload back to your hand. But typically you'll banish the overload from your graveyard. If it is in a graveyard, banish it in order to add either another copy of itself. Not itself, it can't add itself. A copy of the Psy-Frame circuit field spell, or you can get alpha, because alpha can search out your second overload card. So it depends on how you want to play that out. And of course, the ability to recycle stuff is useful. Its field effect is once per turn during either player's turn, you can target one special summon monster your opponent controls in face-up attack position and banish both that monster and this card from the field, and return them in your next standby phase. This is good, really good against exceed summons. Definitely good against exceeds more than synchros and whatnot. Mainly against exceed monsters, because the materials detach once you banish, so it makes them relatively useless. So this is very useful when somebody summons Sky Blaster, for example. They summon Sky Blaster and you're like, alright, banish Zeta and Sky Blaster now. Your turn ends, my turn standby phase, Zeta comes back, Sky Blaster is back on the field in attack mode, and I can run it over and all that good stuff. Useful against monsters that have effects like my stroke. Monsters that if they would be destroyed by battle or card effect, they could attach material to not be destroyed. You can use this to banish them, and then they have no material, so they can't protect themselves, so they can die by battle or card effects, that kind of good stuff. This is good, of course, defensively. In case your opponent summons a monster stronger than Zeta, you can banish this and that monster, as long as that monster was special summoned and it's in attack mode. If your opponent special summons a monster in defense mode, then you can't use your effect, but their monster in defense mode will make it where they can't attack your Zeta, so your Zeta is already safe anyway. So at any moment their monster goes into attack mode, that's when they're a threat, and that's when you can use your effect, of course. But other than that, not a big deal if they bring it out in defense, unless it's Sky Blaster, for example. They special summon Sky Blaster onto the field in defense mode, which should be the smart play, and then banish, and then detach and spin your Zeta back into the extra deck. That's the way your opponent should play Sky Blaster. But if they don't and they summon them in attack mode, then you will punish them for that, right? And I like to play Exodios, the Forbidden Lord, and Necroface to infinitely use the Psy-Frames and have an infinite deck. So I have infinite resource, which is very useful obviously in competitive play, where you want the ability to always have an answer, a response, an ability to play. You don't want to run out of Psy-Frames. You definitely don't want to run out of your frame drives. There might be a moment where you're reacting to your opponent's plays and your Psy-Frame tuners and drives are being banished because of their effect, because you don't have the field spell to synchro instantly. So during your opponent's end phase, they will banish, and then you run out of your Psy-Frame drivers, and without driver you can't even use your Psy-Frames. So that's pretty dangerous. You want to make sure you always have your Psy-Frames, so that's where Necroface comes in. Then Exodios helps you recycle your Necrofaces along with your Psy-Frames, except for the synchros. You don't well, these two anyway, you don't need to recycle them. With Exodios, you can recycle them by themselves and get some pluses out of it, but you can. But for those synchros you use that aren't Psy-Frame ones, then stuff like Black Rose and stuff, those you want to put back in the extra deck so you can recycle them, especially if you're playing one copy of Black Rose, Stardust, Red Dragon, Heartfiend, whatever, Colossal Fighter, whatever, you want to recycle them, right? And so that's how the Psy-Frames can be played and how they function. Now, how do you beat them? Well, the tuners are mainly monster effects, right? They trigger in the hands and they resolve in the hand, then they special summon and they bring out a Psy-Frame driver, and then with the field spell they can synchro. So first off, if you see the field spell on the field, MST it, get rid of it as soon as possible, because you want to avoid the ability of them being able to synchro after they do summon the betas, the gammas and stuff. So that's what you want to avoid. So always get rid of the field spell. That's a good way of beating them right off the bat. But if they have, of course, Necrophase, that makes it where, you know, the whole pop in the field spell, so that way the drivers constantly get banished, won't be the best play. But do it anyway, even though they have Necrophase, to recycle it, because it's better to slow them down, and then they have to use Necrophase than to let them have the field spell and then they synchro and do all types of derpy stuff. So to slow them down, get rid of the field spell. So that's where MST Twin Twister comes into play. You know, among any other card you have to get rid of the field spell. You can use Wing Blast if you want. Monster Effect to get rid of the field spell. A good card against this, right, which I should add to this because it would be very beneficial, but it's more likely a side deck card than a main deck card. Forbidden. There we go. Curseal Forbidden Spell. Curseal Forbidden Spell. It's a lot stronger than MST and whatnot, because you play this discard spell card and then counter the field spell, right? And then your opponent can't activate the spell card with the same name for the rest of the duel. So no matter if they recycle the spell card, they can't play it. So that will kind of pretty much guarantee, you know, they can't play the field spell for a long while. But again, this is more of a side deck card than a main deck card. But if you want to main deck it, or you do main deck it, then you have a good way of making sure the field spell is not problematic. So right off the bat, that could hurt the deck substantially, because they pretty much will never be able to synchro. So all they could do is just react to all your plays, and then eventually run out of resources. But if they have Necrophase, they could recycle it. But either way, all they could do is respond to your plays. They could barely synchro, make plays of their own. So that's something to take into account. Preventing them from being a special summon with the barriers, or Fossil Diana. You can also use Vanity's Fiend, Vanity's Ruler, any monster, Christia, so forth and so forth. You know, you can use Ophion, any monster that will prevent the special summoning of either the tuners or the Psy-Frame driver. In this, with Ophion, what Ophion's preventing is the Psy-Frame driver. And since you can't get both the driver and the Psy-Frame out at the same time because of Ophion stopping the driver, you can't, trigger their abilities. You have to be able to bring out the driver. If there's an effect that, I think there's a continual spell, deck lockdown, if I'm right. Deck lockdown. Neither player can add cards from their to their hands from the deck, and cannot special summon monsters from the deck. Now this card, I'll throw it in there just for the heck of it. This card can be used against them, but again, it's more of a side deck card than a main deck card. This is all about how to beat the deck with your main deck stuff. But as you can see, that card and that card right there have some good side deck functions, or you can main deck them if your deck can run them against them. Other cards that could be used as side decks or main deck is Power Filter, because this won't allow the special summoning of Alpha, Beta, or Gamma. You still can summon Delta and Epsilon if you actually run them. You can actually special summon them regardless. The Power Filters on field. Power Filter only works on monsters that have 1,000 or less attack. This is generically good against a lot of decks that use stuff like Battle Fader, create tokens, things of that nature. Anything that's weak. Can't think of anything else at the time. Treeborn Frog, in case Monarchs, using Treeborn Frog as tribute fodder. This will prevent Treeborn Frog, and anything else similar to that can prevent, tuners to special summon from the graveyard. This is useful against Dustins. If you go up against Dustins, obviously it's useful against Ojamas, like the image shows, and so forth and so forth. It's a pretty decent card. There's no cost, no to play it. So it's relatively useful, as a side deck card. It could be a main deck card depending if how you play your deck. Kaiser Coliseum can definitely be main deck, especially in Bujins or any deck that have floaters, monsters that when they die, they just replace themselves. That way you're always guaranteed to have at least one monster on the field. So that way you're limiting your opponent to only having one monster, so that makes things interesting, especially if you do stuff like you have that one monster, then you summon another monster, then you overlay it to an exceed monster. That guarantees you still only have one monster, but at least now you have a stronger monster. Like you can have Cyber Dragon Infinity on the field with Kaiser Coliseum, for example, and there you go. You just run the game, right? Because you can negate anything, and then your opponent can't do synchro plays or exceed plays and whatnot, because they can't have more than one monster. They definitely can't pendulum, so this is useful against pendulums. But if you only have one monster, Kaiser Coliseum with just one monster is useful against Psy-Frames, because they need to be able to summon both the drive and the tuner in order for their effects to trigger. So they can't use their Psy-Frames if Kaiser Coliseum is on the field and your opponent only has one monster. We mentioned those. Imperial Iron Wall. This is more of a benefit to the Psy-Frames than it is a weakness, but it can be a weakness obviously when going up against the Omega and the Zeta, because right now we've just been talking about the tuners, how to deal with them, but then but if your opponent manages to actually create the synchros, then you gotta deal with them, right? So dealing with them is slightly different. Granted, their effects are monsters, they're monster effects, right? So you can deal with them with skill drain, which I didn't put here, but you can use skill drain. Might as well type it up, right? You can use skill drain to deal with them. Yeah, skill drain, you can deal with them with that, because banishing is an effect, not a cost. Of course, you use Divine Wrath, Solemn Notice to deal with their summoning. Again, they do have the ability to go back into the extra deck, but you could Notice or Divine Wrath their effect in the graveyard to add themselves back to the graveyard, back to the extra deck. But it might not be necessary. It's better to let them go back into the extra deck and save the Notice, for example, for when they actually hit the field, or Divine Wrath for when they hit the field, and deal with them then. Yeah. And Bottomless, it can be used, against the synchros, and definitely can be used against the drive frame itself, the Psy-Frame driver. You can Bottomless him before the field spell resolves, because you can chain. So before the field spell can allow them to synchro, you can Bottomless and get rid of the Psy-Frame driver, and then they can't sync. Let's see. Vanity's Emptiness does what the barriers and the Vanity's Fiend does. It prevents special summoning, so they can't summon. Power Frame, of course, is like the continuous spell version of Vanity's Emptiness. That's essentially what it does. And Assault Mode, Landois, Cyber Dragon Infinity, mainly is to negate the effects. So any effect you have that negates monster effects, whether it be in the hand, graveyard, or field, can be useful. The thing is about the Psy-Frames is that their effects activate and resolves in the hand. So when they hit the field, skill drain doesn't matter. Nightmare Trap Hole. Nightmare Trap Hole cannot be activated against them because it only applies after the summon, but after the summon they're not doing no effect. But the Nightmare can be used against any of the synchros, of course, but it can't be used against the Psy-Frame tuners themselves. But Solemn Notice can be used against them, and so forth and so forth. So there's, as you can see in this list, there's a considerable amount of cards that can be main decked or side decked to be used against them, so at least you have a basic understanding of how the deck functions, you know, what they could do, what they do, what I do with them, with Necroface and YUGIOH, and you have a better fighting chance with this bit of knowledge, and that's the end of the video.